Hey folks, it's timhower. I'm joined by Assistant Sports Editor Alex Riley and UNCW reporter Eric Detweiler. We're going to do a little game for high school football this week. The past couple weeks we've been doing 2 videos. We're going to cut it down to 1 each week. This week we're going to do a game. I've come up with some fill-in-the-blank questions about each Mideastern Conference team, and so we're gonna share our answers, how we finished each sentence, and explain a little bit about why we did that. So we'll start with Ashley, who's a surprise team in the Mideastern Conference. They're 2-0. So the question was, Ashley's 2-0 start is, and then I filled it out with making me a believer. They've done really well these first 2 games, scored a lot of points, defenses look good. I've seen some of the other teams in the conference play. I have not seen Ashley play yet, but I think that they're a top 3, if not a top 2 team in the conference this year. So Ashley's 2-0 start is making me a believer. Alex, why don't you go next?
So mine is Ashley's 2-0 start is. That's what I think. This has been. If you had Ashley as the conference leader at this point in the season, go to Vegas and put some money down somewhere because you're going to make a heck of a lot of money. I mean, Ashley has turned the corner so far this season. They've been very impressive. It's going to be interesting to see what they do once the competition really heats up. But man, Jeff Turner has turned that program around a lot faster than I thought he would. They're in the best shape they've been in a long time.
All right, Eric, what'd you go with?
Well, maybe I'm pumping the brakes a little more than you guys, but I'm going with the highlight of the season so far. Because it's definitely been a great story here through 3 weeks, what they've been able to do. Probably them and Trask being undefeated, the 2 big stories. I don't think anybody thinks that Trask is going to contend, beat Wallace Rose Hill or anything like that. Ashley, like you said, you don't know. Right now, definitely I think the best story of the season so far. Anxious to see what happens in a couple weeks.
All right, let's go to New Hanover next. New Hanover's non-conference schedule has been crazy hard so far, so that was our question here. We went with New Hanover's non-conference schedule is, I went Herculean. Okay, I just think it's a lot to ask of these kids to play Myrtle Beach, to play Scotland, to play Havelock. 3 teams that are going to go really, really far in the playoffs. They also have Purnell Sweat in there. But those 3 teams are really, really good, and that's a tall order for any team, especially a fairly inexperienced New Hanover team.
Similar answer from me. New Hanover's conference schedule is brutal. That's what I went with. Same kind of idea. To play those teams with such a young team that New Hanover has, it's difficult. It's proven difficult, and it will continue to be difficult until they mature a lot.
Yeah, I think we are getting our thesaurus, and I'm going with ridiculous. It's tough. You got to plan out these things a couple years in advance, and you don't know, and you want to believe that you're going to be one of the best teams in the state every year. This year, it's a team that is really kind of getting beaten down, and it's tough, and they're going to be interesting to see where they're at confidence-wise when the Mideastern Conference schedule starts here in a couple weeks.
All right, we'll move on to Hoggard. Hoggard has started the season 1-2 now for the 2nd consecutive year. I've covered 2 of their games, and surprisingly, their defense has not looked like a normal Hoggard defense. So our question here is: so far, Hoggard has shown. I went with a lack of toughness, both mentally and physically. I think each time it seems that the offense scores, the defense allows a big play or allows a touchdown. And they can't sustain any momentum, and just a lack of toughness on the defensive side of being able to tackle anybody right now. Teams are just running all over them, so that's uncharacteristic of a Hoggard team.
And I went with so far Hoggard has shown not much. I think we all kind of expected Hoggard to contend with New Hanover this year, given that New Hanover was so young and inexperienced. And I think the exact opposite has happened. I think they've taken at least a step sideways, if not, as things roll along, a step back. Not a good sign so far. I think they can turn around. They can, focus a little bit more, but it's going to be tough.
I'm going with, so far, Hoggard has shown a flair for the dramatic. I'm just thinking of it, I haven't seen Hoggard yet, but looking at some of those scores, looking at some of those box scores, they're scoring a lot of points, they're giving up a lot of points, there's a lot of big plays on both sides. And once the Mideastern Conference gets going, there may not be, especially some of the 3A versus 4A matchups, not so many exciting games. But it's awesome that Hoggard's getting some experience playing some crazy games and playing, being close late into the fourth quarter. Even though, like these guys have said, not something they necessarily wanted to be a spot they wanted to be in, but they've got some interesting experiences that maybe some of these other teams don't have looking ahead.
Yeah. All right, we'll go with Laney now. Laney had that big win over Rose and then faltered last week against Lee County, weren't able to score any points in a shutout loss. So they've kind of had an up and down season. That's kind of been the theme for them over the last couple of years. So our question is, I'll be a believer in Laney, and I went with if they can beat Hoggard or New Hanover, I'll be a believer in Laney. And I think they can, because I don't think Hoggard and New Hanover are as strong as they've been the past 2 years. And I think, obviously, Laney can play well. They beat Rose, who is still a good team. So they can do it, but they've got to start stringing some wins together and being a little more consistent for me to be a believer and win a big game.
And I went with I'll be a believer in Laney if they can get it together. You can't beat Rose and then come out and lay a goose egg the next week. You just can't do that. But that's where this Laney team is right now. They probably were so hyped up off that game, off winning that big game, that they thought they could come out and beat anybody by just showing up. Well, that's not how it works. You have to show up, and you actually have to put the ball in the end zone and stop the other team from putting the ball in the end zone. They didn't do that last week. So it's going to be interesting to see, can they bounce back? Was that a wake-up call? Can they get refocused? Because like you said, they played well against Wallace Rose Hill, played really, really well against them. Obviously got the big win against Rose. Now it's time to see what they can do the rest of the way.
All right.
I would like to see Laney score some more points. I think that's going to be the key for them. If they can beat Hoggard or New Hanover, they're going to need to score some points. I think they've scored 2 touchdowns or less in all their games so far. You're probably going to need to get to 20 points to beat one of those two teams, Hoggard or New Hanover, in a rivalry game situation. So got to cut out some of the fumbles, some of the penalties that seem like have really been sort of hamstringing the offense. Seems like for them, the defense is in front of the offense at this point, and if they can catch that offense up, like you say, they have a really good opportunity to make this a memorable season.
All right, we're going to move on to West Brunswick now. West Brunswick has one of the best players in the Mideastern Conference, one of the best players in the area, Bubba McRae. So we're going to talk a little bit about him. Pretty simple one. Bubba McRae is, I went with a pretty obvious answer, really fast. He's hard to bring down when he gets past the line, the linebackers. The secondary guys really have a hard time chasing him down. He showed that at the Jamboree with a couple long runs against Hoggard. He's carried that into the season. He's got over 400 yards already on the ground, and he is obviously West Brunswick's best playmaker.
And I went with Bubba McRae is too legit to quit. That's what I went with. You can tell what I was listening to in the car on the radio this morning. No, McRae has gotten off to a really strong start. One of the strongest starts by running backs in this area in a while. And we've had some really good running backs here. And to be at 400 yards already and have one game in there where you didn't rush for 100 yards is really impressive. As long as he stays healthy, as long as they can keep some offensive linemen and some fullbacks in front of him to create holes, he's got a chance to have a really, really big season. As long as he doesn't tweak an ankle or anything like that. So he's too legit to quit, in my opinion.
I'm going with maybe a less rosy picture of Bubba McRae is not enough for West right now. You need to make sure that, obviously he's put up big numbers, but they need to diversify things a little bit, at least show they can throw the ball. Maybe, the box gets stacked of teams trying to stop him. Hits a couple more passes. That was shown last week. I mean, they didn't score at all against North Myrtle Beach. They're going to be playing some of these good 4A teams here in a matter of weeks, and they need to be able, I don't think they can win these games giving Bubba 30 carries a game, because he's not going to make it through the whole season if he has to take 30 hits every Friday night against Laney, Hoggard, and New Hanover. So diversify things a little bit, get some other guys rolling, and maybe they have a chance to really be a factor in that Mideastern Conference race.
All right, let's go. Stay in the same county. We'll stay in Brunswick County, and we'll go to South Brunswick. Rocky Lewis, first-year coach. Obviously, they struggled last week and lost to Pender, which is a game that they probably expected to win. Obviously, Pender is improved though under Bob Vi. But we're gonna talk a little bit about Rocky Lewis and when he'll turn things around. Rocky Lewis will turn South around I said within 5 years. I think that's a good timetable. He's got to get some more players. There's athletes at South Brunswick. He just needs to get them out for the football team. If he can do that, South can start winning 6-7 games each year. And if they can do that in the next 2 or 3 years, then down the road, then maybe they can compete for a 3A title in the Mideastern Conference.
I went with Rocky Lewis will turn south around next year. Now, I think I might have meant this a little more sarcastically, sorry, Rocky, than I actually typed it. I think they're already planning for next year, unfortunately. I mean, no offense, Bob Vi is one of my favorite people to interview and talk to, and I love going out to Burgaw and talking with the Pender Patriots, but you can't lose to Pender and expect to do much else the rest of the year. I mean, Pender is a 1A school with, a bad track record of late. They don't have a lot of kids out there. You've got more kids than they do. You should be able to beat them. Not only did they get beaten, they got beaten pretty soundly. So I think it's going to take a while for Rocky to turn around. I'm hoping next year that maybe he can get the process started, but I think this year at this point, it might be a lost cause.
I'll say he'll turn South Brunswick around if the bus gets a flat tire. I don't want to make fun of anybody, but at this point, like you said, it's tough coming off a loss to Pender to even think about it in terms of time or years. It's really just week to week at this point. They're in a bad spot, and there's a lot of work to do there, and it's going to be a big challenge. That'll be interesting to see if he can sort of get the culture changed, get some of those work habits changed, which you need to do to rebuild a program while things are so bad, and some of these tough, really lopsided losses where there aren't a lot of positives. That'll be interesting to watch as the season goes on.
All right, and we'll finish it up with Topsail. Topsail is coming off a win over Dixon, and they have a tough challenge this week against Croatan, who has a really good running back. So we're going to say Topsail's season will be a success. Right now they're at 2 wins. I say they'll have a successful season if they get to 5 wins. They win 5 games. Looking just at their schedule, it's really tough over the next couple weeks. They've got Croatan, and I believe they have Jacksonville, and then conference play gets going. So all the conference games are going to be tough. I think they can beat South Brunswick, obviously, and maybe steal another one over somebody in the conference, which would get them to 4. And then maybe if they can steal one of these 2 non-conference games, they can get to 5. I think that would be a good season for Topsail.
And I didn't catch this when I typed it. I was thinking about other conferences, but I meant 3-3. I think there would be a success if they can go 3-3 this year. I think in conference play. I think that they can beat South, obviously. I think they've got enough talent to compete with someone like an Ashley, maybe even a Laney or something like that. So if they could get to 3-3 in the conference and get beaten by West and Hogger and New Hanover, I think that's a pretty successful season for them at this point, especially with DJ Montano no longer with the team. Now they're relying on a freshman running back. There's just so many key parts that have gone missing and things that can happen that I think if they could get to 500 in conference play, that would be the best scenario for them.
I'm going with if just one game. If they beat West, I think that really changes things and how you look at the season. Obviously it doesn't seem like South Brunswick is going to be a factor in the 3A race in the Mideastern Conference, so it really comes down to that one game. If you beat West, then you get a better seed in the playoffs and actually have a chance to win a game. If you don't beat West, you're probably still going to make the playoffs, but it's going to be, playing a really good, high-seeded 3A team and, probably not the end of the season that you want. So go out and, really, obviously they're going to be building towards that game and, take it week by week, of course, but really I think that 1 week is really going to decide a lot about how things are going to be remembered for Topsail this season.
All right, so there's our thoughts on the Mideastern Conference. Next week we're going to come back and we're going to look at some of the other teams in the area, and we'll do the same thing with some of the other teams in the area. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter. We'll all 3 be out at games on Friday, so be sure to follow us on Twitter, and we look forward to sharing some information with you.